We started after David has been told by the Navi, in the name of God, that he is not being given permission to build a temple. However you explain that, whatever the reason, is not so important at this point. It was when we discussed it. But once we accept that he is not going to do this, and God predicts that in the future there will be more land captured by the Jewish people to occupy, and only then there will be a peace, and then the temple will be built. So David occupies himself with doing that. So he first of all attacks the Philistines, then he attacks the Moabites, and then he attacks page 18, the people in Ruchov in Sova, which is in Syria. We said it's called Aleppo. Aleppo is a town in northern Syria. That was the town itself wasn't attacked, but the forces were. That's what we did in Pasuk Gimel on page 18. Vayach David, top line. You notice that the psukim and the indication of a new pasuk is now not in brackets as it used to be. I just need to be some new font that I used. Which is that Gimel. It means pasuk Gimel. Got it? The Gimel on the top line. New pasuk. Right, you put a circle around that. Good. Vayach David, and David struck Es Hadadezer. That's the name. I think the king of Tzava. He was the son of Ruchov, and he was the king of Tzava. He struck him, not in town, Belechto, when he left town, to go Lahashiv Yado B'Nahar Parat. He went to settle his hand, or to settle the area, or to take back Lahashiv, like Teshuvah, to bring back to his hand something in the river Euphrates. So some area of his, which had been his property near the Euphrates, had been taken by, I don't know, by somebody, okay, and he went there to bring it back. So at that point, David and his men attacked, and whatever. Pasuk Dalet. By Yield Code, David, at that point, David captured. Yield Code means to capture. Lachad, to capture. Mimenu, from him. Mimenu sometimes means from them, but sometimes means from him. You can't really tell what it means except from the context. So he captured from him, from Hadadezer, Elef Ushva Me'ois Parashim. Elef means 1,000. Ushva Me'ois, come on, Sheva?
Seven.
Good. Me'ot?
100.
700 Parashim. Parash is a horse rider, cavalry. So 1,700 horse troops were captured in this battle against Hadadezer. The Esrim Elef Ish. Feeling better? And 20,000 men. Ragli, foot soldiers. 20,000 foot soldiers, 1,700 cavalry. These were captured in the battle against Hadadezer. What did David do with them? Vaya'aker David es kol ha'rechev. And David did something to all the chariots.
Okay.
Yet la'akor. Akar means to uproot. Now, how do you uproot a chariot?
How do you uproot a chariot?
Yeah.
Flip it over.
Well, the expression to uproot is usually used with horses. Expression, we had it in the book of Yeshua. The Yeshua, when he captured horses in battle, he would hamstring them. Do you know what hamstring means?
You would what, cut their hamstrings or something?
Right, to cut their hamstrings. Hamstrings are some type of muscle that goes through the leg, and if you cut that, it makes the animal unable to run properly. The point of that is you can use them. It doesn't kill the animal. You can still use the animal for riding. You can still use the animal for plowing or for jobs, but you can't go running on it, right? You can't ride fast. I think that's the point. Now, why would a king do that? I mean, you would have thought the best thing to do was join these horses to your cavalry, right? So there could be two considerations: one al derech hapshat and one derech hamusa. The derech hapshat means if you don't have a cavalry because your army, the country that you run, just isn't suited for those type of animals, right? We don't find often that the Jewish army had cavalry in it, right? That could be because it's mountainous and this area isn't suitable for horses. Could be. Though there are parts where they did do battles with horses. Up in north, there's the Jezreel Valley where you could have a horse battle. There's the Philistines, land of the sea. There are places. So it doesn't really explain well. And you see the enemies had horses, and the enemies... So I think that would be one possible thing. The other possible thing is that in a Jewish army which relies on the help of God, you don't want to get carried away with having a big, enormous army. If you have an enormous army, which is really well fitted and has the best equipment and enormous number of troops, then you start saying, well, we don't really need God to help us because we've got so many soldiers in any case, right? So that might be a consideration. Again, I don't know that. This is another possible consideration of why a spiritually orientated king would not want to have too many soldiers, because people start losing their trust in God, right? There's another thing which is specifically related to horses, which is the Torah says explicitly king's not allowed to have a lot of horses. Only that's not talking about his army. The king's not allowed to have a big horse collection, because in those days the world center for horse production was Egypt, and Egypt have a very negative philosophy or influence on people, and therefore we left Egypt, we want to leave Egypt behind. The Torah says, I don't want you to go back to Egypt to be involved with Egyptian culture, to investigate Egyptian culture. Therefore the king is forbidden for trading in that which is famous in Egypt. So, I don't know.
Still apply?
Well, does what still apply? We don't have kings.
Like
The prohibition to be involved in Egypt,
Yeah.
well, could be. Some say it does. I mean, the Torah says you're not allowed to go back to Egypt. That it says explicitly. Does that prohibition still apply? Simply it does. You know, why Jews lived in Egypt is another question. Right? It could be they had no choice. Some say it stopped applying after a certain point, but the simple understanding, yes, it still applies. Why there is a community there is because that's where they ended up. But so I don't know that any of those three may be reasons. The first one is just we don't need these horses in our army because our army is what's it called? Foot soldiers, not cavalry. So therefore we're not going to get rid of these horses. So we'll use them for ploughing. We use them for doing deliveries, but not use them for racing in battle. Okay. But that wouldn't explain why you have to hamstring them. Just leave them alone and don't use them in battle, right? The second reason explains a better reason, which is the king doesn't want to have the nisayon, the test of having enormous cavalry, which would then, guarantee success in battle. Once you have guaranteed, then you forget about God. That's another possible. It could also be somehow related to the prohibition of kings to have horses. Anyway, either way, I don't know if any of those reasons really explain it. That's what he did. But that's with horses. But here it says he did it to the chariots. It doesn't say he did it to the horses of the chariots, does it? He just says to Rechev. Now Rechev is chariot, as in Merkava, or in Rechev today means car, right?
Rechev.
Rechev is something you ride. Doesn't sound like he's talking about horses. Well, chariots have horses, right? But it looks like that he hamstrung the chariots in a sense that he made them unusable as battle chariots. Maybe for the same consideration, right? For one of the first two considerations, either because we just didn't need them in our battles or because he didn't want to rely on them. So what did he do? Vayoser, and he left over Meya Rechev, 100 chariots. All the others, doesn't say how many there were, got rid of. 100 he left over. So it could be 100 is all we need for our army, or it's not making into an enormous test when you have so many. 100, that's not such a big deal. So he left over 100. Posake. Matavai Aram Damascus. So now he came with his troops on another battle against Aram Damascus. So we know Damascus is another name for Damascus. Okay? In those days it was a whole area. Damascus is a town. Aram Damascus is a whole region. Right? Aram there were many regions called Aram. We have Aram Naharayim. That's where Lavan lived. Yaakov went and got married and he had his wives and children. Aram Naharayim. It's Aram between the rivers. Between the rivers, Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers, between the Euphrates and the Tigris. There's Aram Damascus, Aram Tzova. There's different areas, all governed by Arameans, or maybe Armenians, probably the same, from the same word, and they had different regions, each one with a different name. Aram Naraim, Aram Damascus, Aram Tzova, and he went and conquered this area as well. What did he do? La'azor, Vatovoi Aram Damascus, La'azor Lahadadezer Melech Tzova. So the people of Aram Damascus came to help Hadadezer in his fight against David. But that didn't help him because they got defeated as well. Vayach David, and David struck Ba'aram against the Arameans from Damascus, Esrim Ushnaim Elef Ish, 22,000 men. So I presume that now David can take over control of that country too, as well as Aram Tzova, also Aram Damascus. Vayosem David Nitzivim Ba'aram Damascus. And David placed, Vayosem, he placed Nitzivim. Nitzivim means people to represent him.
Representative.
You would say governor. Like Australia has a governor, doesn't it?
Probably.
Someone who Governor General who represents the king of the British Empire, right? And Gibraltar has a governor as well. So a governor is somebody who represents. So David had someone to run the region. Probably it's trying to say that there were actually Goyim who lived there. He didn't take over the whole place, didn't settle it with Jews, but they paid tribute, and he had one of his representatives to make sure things were run to his, that he wanted it. So Vayosen David Nitzivim Ba'aram Damascus, and he placed Nitzivim in Aram Damascus. But by the word, Nitzivim is from the word to stand upright. Emet v'yatziv. Lot's wife became Nitziv Melech. Lot's wife, remember, she turned around when Sodom was being destroyed, and she turned into a pillar of salt. So Nitziv actually means a pillar. But it doesn't mean he placed pillars, right? It means someone who would be upright in the sense he would be on guard, ready, on duty to serve David if David needed him. So Nitziv literally means a pillar. It's not what it means in the context. It's a representative to represent the king. Vatihi Aram le David, so Aram now became for David la'avodim, a servant. In what sense? Nosei mincha, carrying presents, means they paid tribute taxes. So David is now getting lots of money from all these countries that he's controlling. They're a source of income. Some of the countries were taken over, like Pelishtim, right? Isn't that what David said over here? He took the town. He took the whole nerve center of Pelishtim. That's one. In the Moabites, he controlled them and he almost did genocide, except he left some of them alive. In these places, he made them pay tribute. What else? Vayosha Hashem es David, and God saved David. Wherever he went. Whenever he went, he was successful in his battles. Yikach David, and then David took es shiltei hazav. These are some type of golden, probably ornament. A shellet is a sign. Like you have a shellet on here, it says no entry or exit, whatever it is. It's called a shellet. So these were golden signs. It may not be a sign, just means the shape. Some type of golden shield, or probably, or not real shields. You should make real shields out of gold because they're not very strong. What would they be called? Like ornaments that you would have. Come on, what's the word? When you have it, what? Decorative shields, which you would carry only on some type of parade. Okay, so he took them. Vayikach David es shiltei hazav, these golden ornaments, asher hayu el avdei Hadadezer, that belonged to the servants of Hadadezer, vayiviem Yerushalayim, and he brought them to Yerushalayim. So that was a good loot. Besides the regular tribute that they paid, he also took these golden shields. Umi betach, umi beiroisi, and these two towns, Arei Hadadezer, which were cities of Hadadezer, Lokach HaMelech David, Nechoshes Arbe Me'od, he took lots of Nechoshes. Nechoshes is?
Nechoshes?
Nechoshet.
Nechoshet.
depending if Ashkenazi or Sephardi, how you pronounce it. Nachoshes is copper. So this was a source of copper. Again, a source of the copper mines there in that area, and David took that too. Okay. So this is a lot's coming in to David. What's he doing with this? He's not just conquering land, he's also making a fund for the temple. If he can't build a temple, at least let him raise funds for it. So now he's got tributes from these on a regular basis. He's got his gold, he's got his copper coming in, and all these things will be metals which will be used for the base of Mikdash as well. When Shaul HaMelech is going to build it, he's going to need gold, he's going to need copper. Silver apparently wasn't used.
But he got all of this stuff from battle.
And therefore, you don't think it's suitable to use for the base of Mikdash? Okay. That's a very good point. We'll see how it works out in the end. You know, it's a good point. It's not forbidden. Right? The Torah doesn't forbid you to take things from battle and use them in the base of Mikdash. It does forbid using metal instruments to build the Mizbeach. It also, David was not given permission to build the base of Mikdash because he had spilled lots of blood.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, but we had the whole discussion. You were here last time. Whole discussion about what does that mean? Is that negative or positive? Is it because it had been spilt blood, he killed innocent people, that's why he couldn't do it? In which case, your argument is very strong. But if you're not going to give him permission to build the temple because you kill these people, doing this in battle is not going to give you permission either to build the temple, right? That's your argument, right? The way I said it, maybe your question is not such a good question. I said exactly the opposite. The people David had killed in battle were the enemies of God. Were Philistines and the Amalekites and Moabites and also nasty people, right? So on the contrary, it's because David had sacrificed so much into this. Had he been the one to build the temple, it would never have been destroyed. So it could be that taking all these things in war isn't a problem. It might still be a problem, but it doesn't necessarily follow, right? Okay, so we'll think about that. All right. Now, next point. Vayishma Toi. Toi is the name of the king of Hamat. Hamat is also a name, I think it's today called Homs, which is a town in Syria. Now, it might be the same, although it's maybe only sounds similar if you're Ashkenazi. Hamas and Homs sounds the same, because a Tov and a Sof sound the same. But if you're Sephardi and you're saying Hamas, you say Hamat. Hamat isn't saying as Homs, because one's a Tov and one's a Samach. So it could be it's not the same place. Hamat may be somewhere else, which is Hamat is from the word hot, like Hamat Gader, right? Hamat Gader, but that's near Tiberia, so it's unlikely that Tiberia, which is part of Israel, is going to have a king called Toi, who's not Jewish, who's an enemy of Hadadezer. It's more likely to be somewhere in Syria, which is where Homs is somewhere in northern Syria. Okay, so let's say it's up there, and the king of this place is called Toi. And he heard what's going on. David's attacking, he attacked Hadadezer, then someone came to help Hadadezer, and he got attacked too, so he decides the best policy is to make peace, right? When you see David, every place where David is going, he's attacking and being successful, maybe the best plan is to make peace with David, right? There's another consideration, which he's happy that David's taken away his enemies, because he was also an enemy of Hadadezer, so he's very grateful that David has got rid of Hadadezer for him. So he comes along and he says as follows: Aish matoi melech Hamas ki hika David eschel Hadadezer. Toi heard that David had strucken the army of Hadadezer. Test. Vayishlach Toi et Yoram beno. Toi sent his son Yoram, el Melech David, to the King David. Lishal lo leshalom, to greet him in peace. Lishal really means to ask. Lishal. To ask someone's peace means, how you doing? Regards. I hope everything's going well. Let's live at peace. That's what it means. To greet him in peace. Ulevarcho, and to bless him. Also to thank him. Alashen nilcham b'Hadadezer, that he had warred or battled against Hadadezer. He was happy and he was grateful to David for doing this. Vayakeyu, and he had strucken him. Ki ish milchamot Toi haya Hadadezer, because he was a man of war. Toi with Hadadezer. I mean, Toi and Hadadezer had constantly been battling. So now that David had taken that enemy away, he was happy and grateful to David for doing this. Ki ish milchamot Toi haya Hadadezer. Right? Hadadezer had been a man of battles with Toi. Uveyado, in his hand, mean in the hands of Toi's son Yoram, who had been sent to give greetings to David. Hayu klei chesef, there were utensils made of silver. Uchlei zahav, utensils made of gold. Uchlei nechoshet, and utensils made of, come on, what's nechoshet? Copper. Now that order strikes me always as being strange. In our world, we view gold as being more precious than silver, and silver being more precious than copper. And it's reasonable to assume that it was always like that. Correct? It's unlikely that there was a time when silver was more precious than gold. It could have been. It's unlikely. So the order's strange. You hear? Asher, what do you say about the order? Silver, then gold, and then copper? It's possibly because gold was so expensive that utensils of gold were nice and pretty, but they weren't very practical. And there probably weren't a lot of them. It was really a lot of money. Whereas silver was more, for example, all the nice things that I have in my house are silver. Not gold. You got a bit of gold jewelry. Who could afford a gold bowl? A gold fruit
I've also
bowl?
heard that silver's a lot easier to maintain. This is what I've
What do you
heard.
mean maintain? Well, it tarnishes silver. So gold stays shiny.
I've
Yeah?
just heard that. So
Okay.
I've heard.
No, so I think it makes sense that the biggest number of presents you would give someone would be silver bowls, something of
Yeah.
I mean, gold would also be second in the list because it's very expensive, and copper would be both cheap and useful, but it'd be at the end of the list.
Yeah.
That's my guess. Okay, let's continue. So this again, another thing that David had. Now it's up to what's David going to do with all these things. Now I have a list of all the money that's coming in, that he'd taken in battle, golden shields, and copper, and the presents, your golden utensils, and silver utensils, and tribute from all these people. So what David going to do with that? That's the next post. Gam otam, also them, hikdish HaMelech David LaHashem. He hikdish means he sanctified. King David sanctified all of these things to God. So to sanctify to the God means to put them in a temple fund, so they would go to be used for the building of the temple. Ima kesef, together with all the silver, v'hazav, and the gold, asher hikdish, that he had sanctified, mikol hagoyim, from all the nations, asher kibesh. So all the nations that we've mentioned before, which was Moab and Amalek, Pelishtim, so these other things that he got now were added to the list. As it says, Me'aram, that was the people in the north. Aram Tzova, Aram Damasek, Moab, that's in the east. With Bnei Ammon, we didn't mention Bnei Ammon yet, but that's another peoples that he conquered. Those are the people in the northeast. Pelishtim, that's the southwest. Amalek, that's in the south. Shalal Hadadezer, from the booty, from Hadadezer ben Rechov, Melech Tzova.
What word was booty?
Booty, Shalal. Mishalal, from the booty. Those are all the different nations around, all the way around. North, south, east, and west. In all the directions. In the east is the northeast and the southeast. Ammon in the northeast, Moab in the southeast, Amalek in the south, but it's in the southwest. Right? The west itself. Why is there no one in the west? Who knows?
Because there's an ocean there.
That's it. Right? There's no one to capture in the west. It's just an ocean. Okay. And then we have in the north. We have in the north, direct north. We have Tzova. We have the northeast. We have Damasek. So we've got a lot of, all the way around basically, David has conquered the enemies and expanded the borders to Israel to the largest that they were. And that brings a lot of money, which goes to the temple fund. Got it? That's the picture. All right, Pasuk Yud. Vayas David Shem. And David made a Shem?
Made a name.
He made a name. So when you say you made a name for yourself, it means you became famous. He did something famous.
Or he's now well known.
Yeah, but correct. But there's something he's about to do now which gives him a name. It means all the other things, we gave him power, gave him wealth, but his name he got from the following story. Vayas David Shem, Beshuvai, when he returned, Mehakoto, from his striking at Aram, the Arameans, Begay Melech. Now, gay means
Ger?
gay, good, Gemol, Yud, Aleph. Doesn't mean happy, as it means in English, or two men who get married. No, it doesn't mean that either.
Is that a valley?
Valley, very good. It means a valley. Right, so this is Gay Melach, the Salt Valley. Where do you think the Salt Valley is? It's not in Utah.
It's the Jordan.
It's the Jordan, right? The Dead Sea. So the Dead Sea, they're just like they produce salt today from there. They probably produce salt in those days. That's called Yam HaMelech, the Salt Sea. So there was a valley. So something happened in that valley. It's interesting the Arameans were there because Arameans don't live anywhere near there. Arameans live in Syria. So it looks like the Arameans had driven down south, marched down south with their cavalry. Okay, and there something happened. Let's see what happened. Vayas David Shem. David made a name for himself, a name. Beshuvo, when he returned, Mei Hakoto, from striking at Aram, the Arameans, Begay Melach, in the valley of Melach, Shmoina Osar Elef, 18,000. Now presumably that means that he struck 18,000 Arameans, right? Doesn't say that so clearly, but that's assume what it means. Just like before, 22,000 was a battle up north. There's another battle against Arameans in the valley of the Dead Sea, what's it called? The Dead Sea Valley. And there was something about 18,000. But it doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't say what happened. Was this some super battle? What gave him a name? The battle against Hadadez in the north where he struck 22,000, that didn't give him a name. And the battle against, what was his name? The other fellow. Aram Damasek, that didn't give him a name. And against the Palestine, and against Moab, none of that gave him this specific battle in Gay Melach. What was unique about it? So it doesn't say over here. Okay? If I'm not mistaken, it says in Divrei Hayom a bit more detail about it. Divrei Hayom is Chronicles, where some of these stories are in more detail. There, I think what the unique thing that David did in this battle was he buried the enemy soldiers.
Buried, like, as in he just dug
a big pit or dug
like
a pit for each
proper-
one. I don't know what it was. I don't know about the details of it, right? But that was an unusual novelty that wasn't done in ancient warfare.
You just let
right?
them rot.
You just let them rot, right? Who cares if they're just enemies, right? They're just animals, let them rot. You bury cows when you kill them. Why should you bury the enemy when you kill them? But David didn't feel like that, and David didn't treat his soldiers like that. So it could be that up till now they hadn't done that either because the enemies had been on enemy territory. So they were left for the enemy to bury. You beat the Philistines, let the Philistines bury their own dead, right? The Ammonites, the Moabites, the Messites. But this was a battle against the Arameans in Israel territory. You got me, Dylan?
Well,
Where did this battle take place? In the Dead Sea. Who lives in the Dead Sea? The tribes who live near Jericho, right? So the Arameans had attacked, and we defeated them, and then the rest of the Arameans ran away. Or there's no Arameans left, I don't know. But there's no one left to bury them. And that was what was unique. That made, that the press who heard about this word spread around the world that these Jews are different than other enemies. They treat their enemies with respect, and even the ones they kill in battle, they bury. So that's gave David a great, became famous because of this. That's the way Chazal read this story. Well, there's a lot of details missed out, right? But you have to read something in between the lines because it says at this point he became famous, doesn't say what it was. Okay? You could add any details you want. You could make up the story you want, but I think that's what is hashed out in Divrei Hayomim about this story. Okay? Alright. Pasuk Yudaleh. Ayosem be'edom netzivim. And he placed in Edom, which was another country that he conquered. Now, Edom is interesting because they're very closely related to us. Edomites are descended from Esau, right? Our very close cousin. The Moabites are also close, but not as close because Moabites are children of Lot, who was Avram's nephew, right? But Esau is much closer to us. Esau and Yaakov were twins, and Esau descendants of the Edomites. And that is a country in the south. It actually stretches across Israel and Jordan. The south of Israel, south of Beersheba, and the southern part of Jordan is one big country called Edom. And the Edomites lived there. Petra, for example, you've been to Petra, right? Petra is where the capital of the Edomites, and he conquered this, and he placed governors over the land of Edom. Again, we didn't occupy it. So you want to know, did the Jews ever live in Eilat? Yes, today Jews live in Eilat. Was it ever part of Israel? The answer wasn't really part of Israel, but there was a time when Jewish people controlled it. This is the time. That area between Beersheba and Eilat, all that area is Edom, which originally Edomites controlled, and now David controlled it, even though Edomites continued to live there, but David had governors who made sure they paid their taxes and behaved. Alright, but Yosem, I think this is the first time that Edom's come under Jewish control. I think so. But Yosem be'Edom, it's right. If you look at the end of, what's it called? Vayend Vayishlach. Then in Parshas Vayishlach in the Chumash Bereshis, there's a list of all the Edomite kings. The whole list of Edomite says so and so from this in the town, he was king and then he died, and his mother was this and this name, and the next king was a whole list of them. And it says that all these kings ruled in Edom before there was a king in the land of Israel. It says that in the Book of Bereshis. Right? And the idea it's trying to say is that the two empires of Yaakov and Esau don't rule at the same time. When Rivka was having those twins in her tummy, and she didn't know what was going on, and she went to ask the word of God, and God said that one nation will be stronger from the other. Now that doesn't just mean one will be stronger than the other, it means one will be stronger from the other, meaning one is strong as a result of the downfall of one. Chazal says it's like a seesaw. If one's up, the other one's down. If the other one goes down, the other one goes up. So either Edom is up. So it says that the kings of Edom, which was an empire of the kings of Edom, existed until there was a king in Israel. As soon as the king of Israel took over, then the Edomites are now under Jewish control. Later on, it became back the other way around. Edomites controlled the Jews at the time of the end of the Second Temple period, and the Edomites, like Herod. You heard of Herod, and his father's name was Antipater, right? They were Edomites, and they eventually controlled. And him and his sons and his grandsons, they went through some sort of quickie conversion, but they were actually Edomites, and they were siding with the Romans, and they controlled. So that's what Chazal see: one's up, one's down, right? So this is the first time where the Jews have been up and the Edomites are now down. Vayosem be'Edom netzivim be'Edom. He placed governors in the whole of Edom. B'chol Edom some netzivim. He placed these governors all over Edom in all different Edomite towns. He called Edom avadim, and all of Edom were servants to David. Again, it probably doesn't mean servants in the sense of slaves. It means servants in the sense of paying tribute. Yoish Hashem is David, and God saved David wherever he went. He continued in this line of victory. Yimlach David, I'll call Yisrael. David ruled over the whole of Israel. David oseh mishpat utzedakah. David did justice and righteousness, the Chol Amor, to all his people. So let's just take a pause over here. Chazal see is a little bit of a contradiction, because the king's job in justice isn't tzedakah. Tzedakah is something which, in court, there isn't any room for tzedakah. You know what I mean? Tzedakah is what you give. A guy needs money, give him tzedakah. Right? In court, you have to do what's just, not what's right. There's laws. So, you know, if the poor guy steals from the rich guy, so then in court the poor guy has to pay back, even though the rich guy is manipulating society, whatever. You hear all these sorts of nonsense there. Robin Hood, right? You steal from the rich to give to the poor. No, you have no right to steal from. You have to go to courts. There's a whole system. There's a way things are done. That's anarchy, just to take the law into your own hands and that sort of thing. So in court we have mishpat. That's the way the court system works. So these two things together, mishpat and tzedakah, don't really work together. There could be two different systems, which means the king runs two systems. One is he has a court system, and there's another system which is called a social justice, social welfare, to make sure that people are looked after, people who can't afford. So there's two things that's the king's job to do. One is to make sure that justice is kept, and one is to make sure there's also social justice, that people who can't afford to work are given help, and there's health care and all, etc., etc. So that's probably what it's describing in a simple sense. The king, after he's finished his battles and got the country settled financially, he's now, and it's not his job to build a temple, so what does he put his time to? Making sure there is justice in the court system, and making sure there is social justice, that everyone is looked after and has health and schools and etc., etc. Get it? That's a simple way to read it.
Is it maybe talking about tzedakah, like charity?
Yes, but we use the word, yes, correct. It doesn't, that's what I was saying. Well,
right.
Social welfare is charity, right? That's what it is, right? You make sure there's healthcare for everybody, people who can't afford. That's tzedakah, you know, it's just a more sophisticated word of the same thing, right? But on a national scale by a king is done to make sure, you know, a king doesn't go around with a tzedakah box in between Mincha and Ma'ariv, right? The king, from taxation, makes sure that people are looked after. That's part of his job, I guess. But Chazal see a different idea over here, which is that the first attempt when someone comes to court, is the courts between two litigants, is the courts have to suggest compromise. A guy can say, I don't want to compromise. I think that the law's on my side and I have the right to win. I don't want to compromise. He's entitled to do that, but a court, the judge in a Jewish court, the judges have to suggest, look, this is what you say. You say it's true that you might win in court, but you stand a chance to lose everything as well. You may think you're right, you may even be right, but if you can't prove in court you're right, you'll lose everything. And you stand to lose everything as well, right? And then it's never good that people come to court and win everything, because everybody thinks they're right in court. No one comes to court if they think they're wrong. Yeah. They think they're going to lose. So it's always better for the stability of society to get people to compromise.
Yeah. If someone does want to compromise, then they usually think that they're wrong. Like they can gain something from the compromise because they know they're going to lose anyway.
Correct. But in the end, it's better for both of them to compromise, because that way both of them are not disgruntled with the court system.
Right. Yeah.
Right? No one really thinks that they completely have no claim if they come to court, because then it's just a waste of time. Because someone's going to cash you out. So you obviously, I don't say ever happens, but usually people come to court both think they're right. That's why they come in. Yeah. So that's why David is doing mishpat and tzedakah, because mishpat and tzedakah together means compromise. Mishpat is what the law is. Tzedakah means it's really what's right, even though it's not the law. That's what tzedakah is. And therefore, it's not tzedakah in the sense of charity. It's putting the two together and seeing that's a better form of justice when you get the guys to agree to compromise. But they don't have to agree if they don't want to. They can insist. You certainly can't force someone to compromise, but that's always the best method. But I'm saying the simple way of reading this is the king has two jobs. One is to set the laws, and one is to collect charity, meaning to make sure that people who can't are looked after. Okay, let's continue. Yoav ben Tzruya. Now it's summarized the king's council. Yoav ben Tzruya al Tzava. That's Yoav. He's the famous Yoav who is unfortunately very strong, but he murdered Avner. Remember, right? Claiming that he had the right to kill Avner because Avner killed his brother Asael, who Avner killed in self-defense. Anyway, Yoav was David's nephew, and he was in charge of the army. Al Tzava. Yehoshaphat ben Achilud. I don't think we had him before. Mazkir. What's a mazkir? What's Zacher mean? Remember. So the mem at the beginning means a person or a place that does this thing. We've had it many times. A mizbeach, a mikdash, a migrash, a mitzbach. These are all places that do something. Right? Mizbeach, a place where you bring zevach. Migrash, which you sent outside. A mikdash, a place where it's holy. So a mazkir is a person who reminds you. What do we call that in English?
Reminder? A
secretary. Oh. So in modern Hebrew, a mazkira, usually they're women, right? The secretaries are usually women, so they call them mazkira. But technically, you could have a male secretary, right? That would be a mazkir, something that reminds you of what you have to do. So David had a secretary, and his name was Yehoshaphat ben Achilud. You've got to go to this meeting, you've got to go and open this, you go to this cheder, right? All these things you have to do in your day. Okay, next one. Tzadok ben Achituv, the Achimelech ben Evyosar Kohanim. They are priests. Now, there obviously were thousands of priests. This is like 500 years into the conquest since Aaron and his sons became priests. Obviously, by now there are thousands of priests. But the point is, they were the main priests. One was the Kohen Gadol, and one was the deputy Kohen Gadol, right? Who has to stand in for the Kohen Gadol if he becomes Tameh. So who are these two? Tzadok ben Achituv and Achimelech ben Evyatar. If I'm not mistaken, Evyatar was the one who ran away. Do you remember that when Shaul killed the Kohanim in Nov, after he heard the report that they helped David, he killed all the Kohanim. There was one Kohen who survived, and his name was Evyatar, right? That was many years before this story. Not many years, but several years before this story. And by now, his son is already taken over. His son is called Achimelech. He's the next in line to be the Kohen Gadol. Usuraya Sofer. His scribe was called Seraya. Means a scribe is he writes notes. But not the same thing as a secretary. The secretary is the one who reminds you of your appointments. The scribe, he keeps a list of all the things you need, or a list of things that happen to you. He keeps a diary, whatever it is. He's a Sofer. Ubenayahu ben Yehoyada. He's very famous, but later on you've probably heard of him. If you've heard of him, Benayahu ben Yehoyada. It's the name of a book written by the Ben Ish Chai. One of the Ben Ish Chai is Rabbi Chaim of Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. He lived about 150 years ago. Very, very famous Sephardi rabbi. In Iraq, right. Ben Ish Chai. Okay, one of his famous farim is called Benayo Ben Yehuda, named after this fellow. Benayo Ben Yehuda, that's the name of his book. What was he? V'hakresi v'haplesi. Now that looks like it means he was in charge of the kresi and the plesi. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Ubenayo Ben Yehuda, what about him? Doesn't say what about him. Doesn't say about it. Just says v'hakresi v'haplesi. What about them? Doesn't say anything. So it seems that kresi and the plesi is a thing which Benayo Ben Yehuda was in charge of. Okay? Now what is this kresi and plesi? According to the simple understanding, it's some unit in the army. I think they're called slingshots and archers. Right? The archers and the slingshot, that was he was in charge of that unit in the army. Chazal read this as a different way. The kresi and the plesi refers to the Sanhedrin. According to them, the makeup of these two words is because the final decision is made by the Sanhedrin. Karet is when you cut something, it means you make it final, right? When you cut a deal, you make it final. When you cut a covenant, when you cut a decision, like a psak halacha, you know the word puskin. The word pasak means to break something. It means that's where the buck ends. That's what they say, right? Right? That's where you send from one rabbi to the next and he ends here. Right? There's no going past the Sanhedrin, that's the High Court. That's called Kuresi. They cut, in the sense, they cut the line of research ends with them. Right? And Pelesi from the word Pele, which means hidden, which means it's their job to reveal things that are hidden to other rabbis. That's the job of the Sanhedrin, that when a rabbi doesn't know something, he goes to the Sanhedrin and they will explain to him what the law is.
Pele is hidden?
Pele, yeah. The Torah says, when something is hidden from you, you shall go to the Sanhedrin to ask for their instructions. That's in Parashas Shoftim, in the Book of Devarim. So Pele, Pei Lamed Aleph, it can mean a wonder as well, right? But it's called a wonder because we don't know what's going on behind. That's what it means it's hidden, right? It's a mystery, very good, right? So a miracle can be a Pele as well. Pile Ploim, right? When something's a wonder of wonders, miracles and miracles. That's a mystery, very good. So anything that's a mystery, you go to the Sanhedrin. So according to the Chazal's reading of this pasuk, Benayo Ben Yehuda was in charge of the Sanhedrin of David HaMelech. Okay. Ubnei David Kohanim Hayu. The sons of David were Kohanim. Now this is a strange pasuk because they obviously weren't priests, correct?
Yeah.
Why weren't they priests? Because they were from the wrong tribe. You're going to be a priest if you're from the tribe of Levi and you're from Aaron, right? And David's sons were from the tribe of Yehuda. So the word Kohanim here can't mean technical priests. And what we generally mean by the word Kohen. It could be that the word Kohen has a more wider meaning. I mean, it said a minute ago, Kohanim. It says David's Kohanim were, it said in the previous passage, Tzadok ben Achitov, Achimelech ben Aviah. So they were the Kohanim. So why would it say David's sons were Kohanim? David's sons were not Kohanim, and you've already mentioned the Kohanim. So there must be another meaning to the word Kohen, which may be similar, but it's not a technical priest. It could be that they were spiritual, it could be they were ministers. You know, we talk about Yisro being a Kohen. Again, what does that mean? Does it mean he was a priest? He certainly wasn't a Kohen in the sense that we mean by a Kohen, right? It could be that he was a Kohen to some Avodah Zarah, right? But it would seem the word Kohanim has a wider meaning, at least in this passage.
Well, Yisro was monotheist, though.
Later on. Not originally. Originally used, Chazal said he served all the Avodah Zarahs, right? And then he gave them all up and came to convert. Right, he was a monotheist before he converted, but that was after he tried it all out. So that's what you have to say. The word Kohen here doesn't mean its standard meaning of a priest who works in the temple. It means something more like a minister. It means David's sons ministered the government, which is very interesting. Which is maybe not a very good way to govern a country, but the people who govern it are relatives of the king. Sort of nepotism sort of thing. This son will be the finance minister, this son will be the agriculture minister, this is the tourist minister, and it's all in the family. Right? It's not good because it doesn't breed, if you know you have the job guaranteed, it doesn't breed competition. and so there's no need to do the best because, you know, I've got this position not because I'm good at it. I've got this position because my dad's the king. So if you're not good at this job, you'll still have it. It's usually better to have someone who's trained and proven that he's good at it.
Hashem promised the whole dynasty of.
Okay, dynasty just means that David will be king and then his son will be king. That's great. All right? So you're trained to be a king, but to give all the different ministries, you know, yeah, you could theoretically train all his children to do that, but look, it may have its advantages as well, right? You know, if you got it, if you're a good king and you've got these people listening to you, and you know, your king just wants to make sure really the king's in control and his children are doing it on his behalf. Yeah, I mean, it could have advantages. I'm sure why David did it like that. But you'll see the number of rebellions that are against David from his sons could be explained by this fact that David gave them positions of power, which could be training them for when they become kings. Yeah, but it has its downside, which is they have a power base and they have connections and it breeds the possibility of rebellion, which it did. At least two of David's sons rebelled against him and tried to take over power.
There's only two.
It's two for sure.
Avshalom, the one in the beginning of Kings.
Yeah, all right, that's it.
I didn't know he had so many
Wow,
sons.
there was a lot more.
He had lots of sons.
What about Shlomo?
No, see, he was a good boy. Right.
Did he try and kill David at one point?
No. Avshalom. Get mixed up. Similar name. Avshalom. Okay? I'm just saying that we'll see later on that David changes his government. Much later on, towards the end of Shmuel base, David changes the members of his government. We'll see why, because of these rebellions. So that could be part of the problem that David's trying to change. At this point, it's mentioned that David's sons were Kohanim, meaning they were in the positions of control. Let's read it like that. It doesn't mean priests in the normal sense, because it can't mean that. What exactly it means, it doesn't say, right? We also know that David's nephew is in charge of the army, right? So that's where you've got the family, which I suppose has its advantages and disadvantages. All right, my friends, that's the end of chapter 8.